Okay, perfect. So thanks a lot for the invitation. So my name is Philip, this is Alex. We are co-founders of PubGrade, and today I want to talk a little bit about the potential of an advertising platform for scientific publishers. So typically when we talk to scientific publishers, we see the scenario that you have a lot of content and it attracts a large and typically specialized audience, and they generate a lot of page views, sometimes like hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions per month. And these page views can actually hold additional value for a publisher, and you can start monetizing on that. So the first thing that typically comes to your mind when talking about advertising is to kickstart or extend your digital business with specialized advertisers that are willing to pay for access to your audience, and that's typically done through classical display advertising, so the banners next to articles, and for example pharmaceutical companies paying for that. But there's actually, or we see a growing demand of using sophisticated advertising solutions also for internal marketing purposes to open up a targeted communication channel actually to the audience that already exists on your site and properties. For example, to make them aware about special issues or call for papers, or even like selling text or ebooks if you have a store. So typically together we try to look into the inventory and then try to discover and if possible tap any potential monetization that could be there. So what are the requirements of tapping this additional page view value? So most important typically is targeting. So you really need to be able to slice and dice your content into dynamic and customized chunks as opposed to having predefined subject categories, because typically specialized advertisers nowadays have a very growing demand into how they want to target and where they want to place their ads. And the same holds true actually for internal marketing. So they really don't want to spam all of the audience in January with message A and then the whole scenario for another message in B. They want to be really specific towards whom they are showing what kind of campaign. The next thing that we saw and see is actually ever-growing demand for monitoring and reporting capabilities. So the external advertisers typically want to have that because they want to see where their money is going into, and some of these spend significant amounts for some publishers. So it's a question of transparency and trust. But in addition, it actually enables them to optimize campaigns. And if an advertiser is able to optimize a campaign based on metrics that they gather, then their return on investment increases. Typically that results in the publisher having a chance to increase CPMs, and also the likelihood of recurring cash flows from one advertiser increases as well. The same again holds true for internal marketing. So if you know what kind of message has been working well towards my audience, you can start extending on that idea or using other areas in the same fashion. And last but not least, I mean, typically, to be honest, it's not going to be your core business doing advertising, and likely shouldn't be. So what we saw over the last years is that scientific publishers really need support in terms of efficient workflows. They don't want to have a lot of staff actually taking care about that, or have multiple tools and infrastructure, or even building it on their own. So that's why we actually developed over the last few years an integrated ad delivery platform, and that actually has a couple of features that help the clients, like superior contextual targeting capabilities. We're going to look at that in a couple of minutes. It's a publisher branded web interface and PDF reporting, real-time campaign monitoring, workflow support actually to increase efficiency of the whole sales cycle there. Then we have a cooperation with HighWire to have a fast and cost-effective integration for you. And we also have staff actually that can be flexibly used to support a publisher being in targeting campaigns or taking care about ad operations, for example. So here you can see a couple of the publishers we currently work with, some more recent, for some we have been working for years now, like parts of Springer Nature, BMC especially like 4 or even 5 years now. Yeah, and now maybe having a look, so what is this guy talking about when he says contextual targeting? So here's an example from an ad, and nowadays an advertiser like this one may have a requirement like saying, I only want to put this ad next to articles that mention A, Transaction 3 times. In addition, a specific product type must be mentioned, and on top of that I want to have a specific cell type being mentioned, and then only if these requirements hold true I want to have my ad being placed next to the article. So they become really sophisticated in what they want to do, mainly driven from business to consumer targeting and advertising as well, where you have very granular ways on how to target your ads. So actually when you offer such capabilities to advertisers, you become more relevant towards them for giving you money actually for advertising, because they receive a higher return on investment. That typically enables you to charge higher CPMs and increases the likelihood again of returning cash flows. So in the midterm actually increasing revenues and profits. And in addition actually to that, the ads are also more relevant for the readers. So there's higher CTRs for these type of ads, and that again results in better click-through rates and actually higher return on investment for the advertisers again. Here's an example for internal marketing, so I'm not a specialist for journal marketing or something, but it obviously makes sense to only show such a message here, like you have a special channel regarding, climate change, only to those people that are reading and interested and likely researching in that area. So posting this ad next to articles that deal with climate change or carbon cycle or whatever, or combination of keywords, and then see what the response is from the community. And the same arguments actually hold true for internal marketing as for external advertisers. So the more targeted it is, the higher the return on investment typically. Yeah, I'm handing over to Alex, who is going to give you a couple of, showing a couple of key features of the platform.
Thank you. So targeting and forecasting. This is the screen where contextual targeting is actually defined in the platform. And it's also where we can run forecasts that tell us how many articles match any given setup and how many ad impressions the system expects to be delivered onto your inventory in any given 30-day window. So to define a contextual targeting setup, we can use any number of keywords or phrases and combine them using Boolean logic. We can also use negation to exclude certain phrases from articles. And we can require a minimum number of mentions per article to increase depth. Besides simple keywords, we can also use the results of the text analysis we perform when we index all of your content. And in the course of that, we identify key concepts that are included in various dictionaries and ontologies we use, including NCBI gene, for example, or medical subject headings. In the near future, what we're also going to introduce is something we refer to as a suggester right now. So for any given current targeting setup or for a given keyword, the system is going to find significant phrases for you that come up in the given subset of articles we're looking at. And that basically helps you to, without being a biological specialist or a specialist in any given discipline, to identify other relevant concepts you can use to target the client's campaign. And then last but not least, and this really supports the sales process, we can generate and export a forecast PDF that can be exchanged with the client, can be discussed with the client, that has all the key details related to a potential campaign. Monitoring and reporting. So we talked about how we target campaigns. Once they're running, we can actually have real-time insights into engagement and campaign performance through this set of tools. And you can also grant access to this to the web views we see here for to your clients if you choose to. So for any of the more than a dozen main views we have in campaign monitoring, the system reports ad impressions and clicks earned and the corresponding click rate. It gives these details either in a table or in a time series graph. Besides the more standard advertising-related dimensions such as campaign, customer, ad placement, banner used, and geography, The system also reports on the individual keywords targeted we saw on the previous screen. So whatever we target, we're going to see a report on regarding the number of impressions, the level of engagement with people who saw the ad, and we can basically take action based on that and optimize the campaign if we choose to, if there's a need to. And here as well, beyond the web view, we can either export the current reporting table into a spreadsheet file or have the system generate multi-page PDF campaign reporting files. So campaign management workflow. The system obviously offers all of the standard ad serving functionality that you find in a professional ad server. But on top of that, we focus on supporting the process that in our experience comes along with advertising sales and ad operations, basically the day-to-day logistics of acquiring and managing campaigns. In the main workflow views, all client requests and actual orders are organized according to their current stage in the whole campaign lifecycle. And for each stage, we aim to provide the most relevant details only. In this case right here, we're looking at campaigns that are currently delivering, but other stages, of course, include archive campaigns that were either canceled or just finished, follow-ups, which adds campaigns that are going to end soon, requests, that what most of the sales process revolves around, where there's either an incoming inquiry from a client or a proactive client pitch we're working on, a proposal where we cross that stage and basically wait for client feedback and potentially a signed order, and then setup after we won the actual order, which covers all of the setup preparations, waiting for assets to be delivered, and required for delivery. And then once that is done, we're basically just waiting for delivery to start as scheduled, and again, deliver. The system constantly flags inconsistencies, such as unassigned budgets or open budgets that haven't been allocated to campaigns. And it also highlights crucial aspects like missing banners or landing pages. And we can set reminders to ourselves so we don't forget to follow up with clients for any of these key issues. One of the things we're really trying to do here is take as much communication away from unorganized channels like email and have all the details we need in the platform so that we avoid confusion and error. Advertiser overview. So once I have selected a certain advertiser in the platform, basically everything I would ever need about that advertiser is in place. I can take a look at past campaign budgets, campaign content, performance, check out all the previous contextual targeting setups, all the creatives ever used, and I can see all of the reports and other documents that were ever generated and stored for the client from this one spot. So now if we start working with a publisher, how do we get a publisher set up technically? We're obviously working with HighWire primarily to standardize the process and make sure it becomes a standardized process. One thing publishers need to do basically is set us up as a subscriber, and that's kind of the most complicated thing about it. From there, our systems will basically visit the website, index all of the back issues, the current issues, and return in regular intervals to check for new releases, and the articles will just end up in the platform, will automatically be assigned to running campaigns where they would match the targeting setup. And again, together with HighWire, all of the integration into your website, JavaScript, whatever is needed to accomplish that, is totally handled by PubGrade and HighWire. Yeah, Philip, I think quick word about the models.
Yeah, so There are several models because they're also like very different. The landscape is very different and diverse in terms of with whom we cooperate. Like Springer Nature obviously is a little bit different to smaller societies. So we developed several models that we can look into with scientific publishers and societies. There could be a larger one just licensing the platform and having like own sales, own ad ops persons, and they just use our technology to do that. And then there's like managed platform versions where our staff can support you, can be either only the targeting portion where we have specialists typically with biology background that make sure that the campaigns are properly targeted, but it can also include ad operations support. Typically done if a society or publisher wants to keep client relationships directly, so they have salespeople, but they because they might want to have other products that they sell to the same client, but they don't want to have or build up internal staff for ad operations. And then there's going to be a marketplace also, because beside this sell-side platform, we are also developing a buy-side platform that is going to help further reduce administrative tasks like sending creatives around, etc., where advertisers log in, they upload stuff, and everything automatically gets connected to your sell-side platform later. Yeah, and then we are happy actually to get in touch if someone is interested. I mean, we have been talking to some of the societies or publishers in this room already. And then we can actually arrange a conference call and can make a full demo of the platform, also talk a little bit more about integration. Yeah, and now we are happy to take any questions that you have. Thanks.
Well, I have a question. On the previous to the last slide, you had the managed platform, which was, are you essentially running an ad sales network using the inventory of the publishers who are cooperating in that platform?
And that's the idea of the marketplace. So there will be a lot of publishers likely that could attract could attract advertisers' money, but they will be too small separately, and it would not be efficient for the publisher nor for the advertiser to have direct deals. So that's why we're working on this type of marketplace, such that we can connect a lot of smaller publishers as well later on, and they can make some money. But in this case, actually, they will not need any staff. We will take care about all the operations in the background. Of course, they have access to the platform to monitor things and control what's happening on the platform. But ideally, they can also participate in this ecosystem, what nowadays is more or less close towards some larger publishers or very specialized societies.
Another aspect, obviously, is the effort involved in targeting such a campaign. You really have to think about what the advertiser is trying to sell. Mm-hmm. Some people can't. Some people don't think it fits their role. Operations, sales. So that's why we currently, while trying to make this process a lot easier, I mentioned the suggester that really tries to give you educated suggestions based on a few keywords. But there's still effort involved where we can just help in the background, take the pressure away, and just help with forecasting and targeting, and leave everything else to the publisher.
Question over here?
In a traditional publishing model, what's the timing of your search as the manuscript goes through production? You trying to do it way in advance so that you coincide advertising appearance, or how do you time the sequence of various?
The updates that...
I think I would need a mic, I'm sorry. Could you have the mic?
So when in the content processing workflow do you pick up new content? Do you recognize it? Do you say, oh, this is right for these ads?
Well, actually, right now, classically, we scan the usual bridge pages on publishers' websites on a daily basis. So whenever something pops up there, it gets indexed immediately within a few minutes, and then gets assigned to running campaigns. So it's not like, for example, that an article that it gets released today does not deliver ads that were started 2 months ago. So it really picks up immediately once it shows up on the web, so to speak, because this is where we operate.
Because if I just may ask a supplementary, it would be better in a way to do it before it gets to that stage, so that you can begin to coordinate appearance of articles with appearance of advertisements, I guess, but just a...
Yeah, that's perfectly true. So what we're discussing is the current iteration of our cooperation with HighWire. And it's also born from the fact that most publishers, unless you really engage with a full cooperation with a platform provider, most publishers don't typically assign too much development time to things that are advertising or marketing related. So we really had to build everything we do as easy and pluggable as possible. And this is basically the reason. It would make sense to connect directly to HighWire and fetch these. So yeah, that's true.
All right. Any other questions? So you're interested in hearing from publishers in any of those verticals?
Sure.
If they're interested. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bernd? So I think I mentioned in this morning's talk, I showed that slide about how manuscripts were being retained within the Nature and Cell branded journals, and these Nature, Cell, Elsevier, and so on all have very active retention programs for articles. I actually met someone in Elsevier whose role was retention. Didn't say what he was supposed to be retaining, but I figured it out within about 2 minutes of having a conversation with him. And one of the things that's always been a challenge is for publishers with a relatively small number of journals to build a retention program. I think what Bernd is going to introduce to you is a possible approach to doing that through collaborations.
Okay. Thanks, John, for the introduction. I guess my title shouldn't be retention, but retentive. So we'll see how we do. I've been awarded a generous 20 minutes, that runs into the lunch break. So if you smell lunch at the back, you can just wave your hands, and I'm going to stop talking. Okay. So I wanted to particularly talk a little bit about why we started the Life Science Alliance Coalition, and try to emphasize what's different to the classical retentive trickle-down journal that John just described. So I hope I can illustrate that it's slightly different to the usual. In particular, also emphasizing the portability of papers and peer review in the process, which I think is crucially important moving forward, also with a view on the preprints that we've been discussing. So what's the big issue? Of course, we all know that papers go through serial submissions. There's various estimates, and you can see on the bottom left here one survey that was done by ASA Bio, which we'll talk about later, which shows that people go through 3 or 4 or even 5 journals before they actually find a home. And on the bottom right there, you can see messages from a couple of days ago from somebody who came to EMBO Journal and actually forgot to reference a highly relevant paper. And it turned out they actually didn't forget. They did it on purpose to make the novelty of their paper stand out a bit more, because they were frustrated that they had been rejected 9 times beforehand. So this is completely unscalable, not just because it frustrates the authors, but also because it completely depletes the referee pool. It becomes completely unscalable as a systems, from a systems point of view. Why is this, of course, happening? It's because journals select not just for quality, but for their editorial scope. And at our journals, I represent particular EMBO journal, but we have published 5 journals. Now we very strongly select for a broad interest, but also for very strong level of novelty or conceptual advance. And this is not selection for basic quality, but other attributes. And of course, we reject many, in fact, most of the papers we reject are not because they're flawed, but because we simply don't think they particularly fit our journals. So we really want to find a system where we can transfer those out more efficiently without going to new referees. And we want to give authors more say in the matter. And that's the big problem with the silos, that they don't allow that. What facilitated all of this is really a standardization of the process, because you will see that we're trying to set up a network across different platforms, and that's what's different to the typical trickle-down, and that's really been helped along by what's called a new standard called MECA, which was really conceptualized first by John, I think, it's fair to say, and then co-developed with a bunch of the manuscript tracking platforms and the National Standards Center in the US. And that's just been released earlier this year in January or February, I think, and there's a little news piece on that if you're interested in that. So what it allows us to do really is to come to a situation where we can take in papers, transfer papers within our little network of 5 journals in-house, but also take in referee reports from other publishers, which we already started doing sort of anecdotally very, very successfully. And we call this arbitration. We take referees that are often unnamed from other journals and just take them essentially at the moment at face value, and that's a problem because you need to trust the authors, they didn't modify them. But then we add another expert on top, which we call arbitrator, but they don't re-review the paper. And we added on the right here, you can see this journal Life Science Alliance that really aims to capture all of this stuff that we don't accept in our very selective novelty-driven journals. The other thing was, of course, that's been mentioned several times here already, that we noticed alongside everyone else here in the room that there was a drift down in publication rates at many of the community-driven journals, but even the more specialized nature journals. So you see NSMB, Nature Structural Molecular Biology up there, but also Nature Cell Biology. All the smaller journals are sort of seeing a general drift down in publication and submission rates. And why is this? Of course, we all know why this is. This is the giants that are exploding on the scene, in particular Nature Communications in our space of science. And this is really driven by these silos that John mentioned that have been evolving. They're great business models, of course, and you can imagine what the big 2 silos are here. And we are then the little shack there on the bottom right that really doesn't scale in any way with these growing silos. So the question for us was, do we start another mini silo on the side of this? Is this actually a really good concept, or should we do something more distributive, like a bigger holding platform that is actually more community driven? The other consideration was that people are terribly frustrated with publishing overall, because they find they can't publish refuting data, as you can see here, but also many other things. They find it very hard to publish descriptive data sets such as resources and methods, but importantly also confirmatory data. That's the fundamental tenet of science, that we can publish these, and yet there's no outlet for these in reputable journals at the moment. Of course, PLOS ONE tried to address this, and that was a very good thing, but it's still not really cottoned on. In particular, also refuting data, and we really should not forget about, because scientific dialogue really depends on it. So we launched this journal Life Science Alliance, which is not called journal per se, because we wanted to move it beyond journals actually. So this is an alliance really for aiding the distribution in a rapid, fair and transparent way of papers. And this was really came together because 3 institutions really recognize exactly the same problems that I just outlined, and that's Rockefeller, Cold Spring Harbor and EMBO. And we just thought, rather than launching yet another mini silo on each of our little turfs, that we just do something together and maybe make this in a way that's scalable and able to broaden further out. So at the moment, these are the journals that are part of it, about 12 journals. And what's different to classical silos, I think, is that we have an informed transfer process. So there's really a very efficient system where the editors of the, if you want, the donor journal, have a very rapid process of interacting with the editors of the Life Science Alliance journal within about a day. And the Life Science Alliance editors don't reread the paper from scratch. They basically base their decision on the summaries provided by the editorial process of the donor journal. And that's what makes it very efficient and scalable and lean, if you want. So we standardized our editorial assessment across these 12 journals, so they're all using the same structured format now. So that makes it much easier to assess at Life Science Alliance. So it only takes about a day. We commit to using only 1 set of referees, so there's no new referees added, so the author passes through the process with 3 referees, and we only have 1 round of experimental revision in the whole process. And that seems to work quite well up to now. It's of course open access, but it's very much focused on open science too. We're very much pro and embedded with preprints, and we are strongly pushing at that journal source data. So the papers are enriched with data, fully interlinked with data platforms, So this is not just a journal that's trying to cut costs and publish cheap open access. It's got all the bells and whistles of our existing journals, but it's trying to use different, to publish with different editorial attributes. We in particular want to publish all research that is not just high quality, but that is of particular use, or that's useful to the scientific community. And that's what really sets it apart from a journal like PLOS ONE. So it's still highly selective, but not for novelty so much, but for science that is particularly useful to a specific community. If that doesn't make sense, ask me in the questions about that. We, of course, have these policies that we already established at our existing journals, and it was already mentioned by Catherine, scooping protection extended to preprints, and we have, importantly, the same quality criteria as we have on our existing journals. A few screenshots of what it looks like. So this is a typical EMBO journal, EJP-based view of a manuscript with all the files, as you can see. And at the bottom now, you can see that there is a new thing called complete shared review referral, and that is the thing that triggers what we call a ping to Life Science Alliance. And that's what it looks like then on the Life Science Alliance side. So the editor sees this thing basically saying, "Hi, Life Science Alliance, what do you think about this paper?" And then they get the structured referee editorial summary of the paper. They assess that. They don't usually read the paper. They can escalate that to their scientific editorial board if they want to have a second opinion, so they have access to all the files. But they usually base their decision based on the summary. And then that's what it looks like on the donor platform from another journal. So this is at this point now Rockefeller University. So they have also an EJP-based manuscript tracking system, but you can see it looks a little bit different. But again, you have exactly the same complete shared review referral at the bottom of it. So this is now across publishers, and this is how it looks like then in terms of the response at the Journal Life Science Alliance. The editor can trigger one of these three choices: invite the paper in, don't invite the paper in, or no reply if they don't manage to get around to it, basically. We also have a system that if the editor doesn't get to the paper within 48 hours, the upstream journal just moves on. So it doesn't delay the process at the upstream journal. So that automatically goes back into the normal tracking system of the donor journal. Okay, and then this is the important part, the MECA standard allowed us to move also across publishers, because actually Cold Spring Harbor is on the bench press system, and this is what it looks like on the bench press. It has exactly the same, where basically a manuscript comes in now, and you can see at the bottom there the manuscript tracking number actually has the MECA thing at the end of it. So that allows it to be transferred between bench press and EJP. And of course, the same, it was already mentioned, the same technology also underlies the B to J and J to B linking between BioArchives and our journals. That's something I would strongly encourage you to also embrace. That's a really powerful system. It's growing very rapidly for us. We get a lot of transfers into both directions now, and the quality of the papers is really very good. So this is something that's really is beneficial, I think. And so what about the success of this? What's the pickup? We see, and this is pretty close to what we actually modeled, of course, the people that have already been reviewed at one of the donor journals are much more likely to engage and move to this new journal. It's an uncharted territory. It's got a name that doesn't even say journal on it. It's got no impact factor, God forbid, and so on. So we weren't expecting a huge take-up, but there's about 20% of people, when there are referee reports, that take up the offer and go and come over to the new journal. It's 6% for papers without peer review, as many of you will probably have too at your journals. We only referee a small number of the papers that are submitted, of course. So most of the what we call pings are actually for non-peer reviewed papers. So that's 6%. So that's pretty much along what we expected. And if you look at the volumes, I don't want to go into great details, but these are all the contributing journals, and you can see the various volumes of this ping, of these suggestions to Life Science Alliance for papers they want to take. What's important to focus on is that the green bits are the ones where Life Science Alliance agreed with the donor journal editors that the paper that was offered is actually appropriate for the journal. So there's a really high success rate, so there's a very good prediction of what Life Science Alliance wants. And of course, the red things will decrease with experience. And at some point, we're thinking we may even be able to switch that the donor journals can make decisions in-house to make it even more effective. But we're quite nervous about doing that because we want to retain independence, of course, also of Life Science Alliance. Let me just close now so we have a bit of time to discuss. The point of this system is that it's also scalable beyond the existing journals that you just saw. And one thing is that we're quite open to include more affiliate journals in a transfer network. This can also be at a more a sort of affiliate level, if you want, that we can encourage paper and referee report portability to journals outside this particular group, so that you can that the author has a choice if they want to go to Life Science Alliance or to another existing journal maybe with the same referee reports, or both maybe. And with this MECA standard, this allows us to be much more flexible about this. And the way we could foresee financing this in the future, if you imagine that we would do peer review for other journals in the future, so that we send something out and then it gets published in another journal that charges an APC for that, we are quite open to have a sort of APC rebate arrangement, if you want, that the journal that ends up publishing the paper finances the peer review that happened elsewhere. I think that's an important part of the network to make it sort of scalable financially. We're currently thinking about portability, extending this to any journal, that we would actually give the authors the referee reports in hand and say, these are actually yours, do with them whatever you want. So you can take them to any journal, they can contact us, and we give the identities of those referees to the journal. This is already our policy. It's been our policy for years. The same at Rockefeller, actually. Almost nobody does this at the moment because it's a sort of hidden little policy that we have, but this could become really quite big. And if these networks really start growing at the level of these community type publishers, maybe these large silos get a little bit hot. And we can maybe dampen them down a little bit. I think silos make a lot of sense. They're natural evolution of business models and so on. But if you look at this from a scientific community point of view, they're also quite dangerous because they become cartels at the end of the day in an extreme form, and cartels are never good, because they become monoliths where single individuals basically govern the whole of science, and that cannot be good for anyone. So I think it's important to rebalance the system a little bit, because at the moment the economics are skewed. As we move into an open access world, it's likely to get even more skewed, because volume matters now, and we struggle to have business models that survive in an open access world with all the sort of bells and whistles that we try to add to our journals. Okay, any questions on that?
Theo?
Bernd, I can't remember if you were involved in the neuroscience consortium that had a sort of trickle-down approach, but kind of found that most people, there were sort of discussions about why is my journal lower on the rank and this kind of thing. Have you managed to avoid that with this?
Yeah, so that's a good, so Theo refers to the maybe first network, community-driven journal network that emerged already about 10 years ago between about 17 neuroscience journals. We were actually part of that also. There's very, very small volumes of transfers in these networks. The reason we think this is different is because we give a very strong commitment up front. Okay, so the difference is that you as an author get basically almost a contract with the journal, where we go and say, we have actually already talked to Life Science Alliance, and they will do this and this. They will, in an ideal case, publish your paper without further revision. You can also come back to EMBO Journal, but you have to do that in that experiment, but you can publish it as is in Life Science Alliance, okay? Or pre-review, they would say, for EMBO Journal, you would have to do a lot of stuff, so it's a bit early for peer review, but you're welcome to do that. But Life Science Alliance will review your paper. That's very different to the Neuroscience Consortium, which was much more vague. It was the usual you might consider, you might want to think about, and those things are not picked up a lot. Of course, they do work a treat at Nature, where you have this monolithic Nature communications. As you probably know, they also moved into this more informed transfer arrangement now. They've been trialing this between Nature Cell Biology, Nature Genetics, and Nature Communications, where they also do this pinging, where they pre-circulate and the editor of Nature Communications will have a quick look at it. So that will make them grow even faster in the future, I think.
In the back.
And so a couple of questions. What's your direct submission rate to LSA, or is that not something you're targeting?
No, of course we're open to direct submissions. At the moment we've got about 20 direct submissions. I mean, so this was just started in January. So this is still emergent. We didn't, of course, expect to get many direct submissions at the beginning, but certainly it's a standalone journal that takes direct submissions and is very happy to take more.
And are you committing to publication at the time of transfer? Does LSA reject papers that have been transferred with agreement?
Well, that's the whole point. You want to be as clear as possible. So when there are referee reports, LSA will already look at those reports and make a very clear statement to say, we can publish as is, or you will need to do experiment 5 from referee 3 and we will publish if it works out, basically. So there's a very clear granular communication that tells the authors exactly what we can commit to. Of course, if the paper has not been peer reviewed, we cannot commit to that. But the commitment will again be, we will peer review this, and if the quality standards are met, we will commit to publishing it. There's going to be no influence of the referee saying, this is not as exciting or sexy as I expected, referee 3, and it's rejected for that reason. That's what's causing a lot of rejections at the classical journals.
And then one other quick question is, you said something about with the transfer of reports that you're willing to transfer referee IDs as well as the actual reports. Are you requiring referees to accept that, to say they're happy with that? How are you handling the kind of confidentiality in that context?
Yeah, so at the moment, the referees are told when we invite them already that within our existing networks, including Life Science Alliance, that these transfers will happen and they can opt out of that. So there's an opt-out. Yeah, so there's an opt-out, and the opt-outs have been quite low actually. So it's quite reasonable. Now, if we open this system beyond our existing journals, then it of course becomes an open question how willing referees are to engage with a much wider community. That's a good question. We are not totally clear how that would develop. But I think many referees realize it's terrible. The system is overstretched, and anything to sort of break through these endless re-review cycles is seen as a positive. That's sort of filtered through the whole community now. So I think people are more willing than they used to be to engage with that.
Other questions? Bernd, do you see the Life Science Alliance expanding to include more partners, or do you see others minting things similar? So among development journals, would there be
that's a good question.
A developmental Life Science Alliance? Or which is a preferred model?
So as you probably noticed, I was mentioning these monolithic structures. I would probably rather not develop yet another huge silo monolithic structure. So I think it's not a bad idea to maybe have several of these consortia, because they can also be much more geared to specific communities. We already had the discussion about why we have a preprint server in medical sciences. I think there's a lot of reason to have that, because the criteria are simply very different. So I would see these sort of structures emerging in several places. You're absolutely right, in chemistry, maybe also physics, physical sciences. So yes, I think more distributive is better, but of course this is expandable. So we're sort of welcome to discuss with other partners how we can expand the system too in our space.
I think if you are thinking about setting up something similar among a colleague group of publishers, it'd probably be very good to consult with the 3 partners who set up LSA, because they went through a lot to get to where they were. A lot of organization discussions that just wouldn't even show in a
that's a good point, John,
like
actually. So just to make the point about, so we have 3 partners, and it's actually, there was a lot of negotiation and discussion, because everyone has their own parochial ideas how things should be done. We all have our institutional cultures and stuff. This took about 2 years of discussing, and I think if we had 6 partners, it would be exponentially. I think 3 to 4 is sort of a good place to start.
All right, thank you very much.